we're back. More importantly, you're back. You were busy doing other things last week, so I was on all on my own. I felt a little bit like it was like one of those terrorist hostage video where they were making me talk about sports, but I found a way. Interestingly enough, it was one of our more viewed videos, so maybe you shouldn't be in these anymore.
Probably because people thought that it was an ISIS hostage video.
Yeah, they were like, oh my goodness, I can't believe what's happened to Ben. That's horrible. Nevertheless, Penn State is coming off of a 39-0 victory over Illinois. It was a game that Penn State pretty much controlled from the outset. When Christian Hackenberg is catching touchdown passes that things have gotten out of control. But to Penn State's credit, this was a game that I thought that they would win, but I think we both assumed that it would be closer than it was. If for no other reason than, Big Ten games are very rarely, especially in the middle of the pack, blowouts in either direction. They're normally pretty close. I had it at 27-10, 27-13. But Penn State took care of business. They were up early, often up the whole game, and really never looked back. And that's the kind of game that Penn State needed, and really the sort of confidence builder, no matter who you're playing against, that sort of makes things easier for once for a game moving forward.
Yeah, I think Penn State's still searching for that perfect, complete game in all three phases. The offense played very well, obviously, putting up 39 points. The defense had a shutout, and then you have Joey Julius, who misses a couple of extra points for the second time this season. So you have some special teams failures, unfortunately, but overall, when you win a game 39-0, there's not too much complaining that you can do.
Yeah, and I think Tyler Davis did a good job coming in and making those kicks. Certainly, it was about as low pressure of a situation as you can get as a kicker in a game where you've won handily already at this point. Just go out and get the job done, but he was able to do it. Joey Julius, James Franklin hasn't really committed to either of these guys, at least publicly, this week, so it remains to be seen whose job it will be to go out and try and get those extra points. You like to think that maybe Julius just had a bad day, that he's probably capable of kicking extra points. I think his leg's a little bit stronger, but Tyler Davis, to his credit, has gone out and done everything that people have asked of him. Although he had a kick go out of bounds on a kickoff, which has been a bit of an issue for everyone that's tried to kick it off.
Well, at least now we're platooning kickers and not quarterbacks at Penn State. So it's a step in the right direction.
It is a step in the right direction. Nevertheless, pretty straightforward game. Defense played well. Trace McSorley got some time. Franklin said yesterday after practice that they actually kept first-team offensive players in the game with McSorley to give him some meaningful reps, because there's only so much you can gain from putting a second and third team guy out there with second and third teamers and have him try and get a good experience out of it. So all in all, it was a good win. Penn State's defense got the job done again. The Penn State's offense looked pretty good for 4 quarters, and Penn State special teams managed to make the mistakes on the right week when it didn't matter at all. And Koa Farmer had a big kickoff return to open up the second half, and Penn State scored on that drive. And he's been a guy that's looked like he's been a block or two away from springing one for a while now. So some things clicked, some things didn't, but that's sort of middle of the pack football. With Illinois in the rear view, that game is come and gone. Penn State won it. It is a big road matchup with Northwestern this weekend for both programs, really. Obviously, we're talking from the Penn State perspective, but this is a big opportunity for both programs to kind of get back on track. Northwestern starts strong, beats Stanford in their season opening game in Evanston. It looked like maybe Pat Fitzgerald had sort of turned the corner with his career, in the very least. Started the season with a marquee win because Stanford's turned out to be a pretty good team. Beat Minnesota, Minnesota team who has struggled in the early part of the year and then has sort of found their stride a little bit. Obviously, they lost to Michigan, but they very well could have won that game had they managed the clock a little bit better at the goal line. They lose to Michigan on the road. That's a tough place to play. They actually get shut out in that game, and then they get blown out by Iowa, an Iowa team that's in the top 10, is playing good football. And then last week, or the week before actually, because they were coming off of a bye, they beat Nebraska, a Nebraska team that has lost just about every game.
Barely beat Nebraska.
by the skin of their teeth. Nebraska has lost by 5 points, by 3 points, by 1 point, and by 2 points twice. And their biggest loss has come by 10 points. So it's really one of those things where Nebraska.
They could be undefeated.
They could be. They're not, but they could definitely. Everyone could be undefeated, and Nebraska is certainly part of that conversation of the what ifs. So that's been a tough first year under Mike Riley. Nevertheless, though, Penn State is not playing Nebraska this week or this season. They are, in fact, playing Northwestern. Although that'd be interesting if you showed up to Chicago and a different team was there. Like Northwestern's opted to substitute their right to pick a different team to play for them this week, and they've picked Nebraska. Nevertheless,
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Never mind. I'll tell you when you get older. But Northwestern's a pretty straightforward team. They've got a mobile quarterback, they've got a running back, and they've got a receiver that they throw to. Really, the offense in and of itself is not all that threatening, but they've found ways to win. Clayton Thorson's a guy that can run. He can beat you on your feet, or on his feet. That'd be something else if he could beat you on your feet.
It certainly would be.
He can beat you with his feet, and he's been able to beat some teams with his arms. I'm just thinking of the imagery of that too. It's been a good imagery segment. Nevertheless, mobile quarterback has given Penn State trouble the past couple weeks. Face another one this week. Maybe not the best one that they have faced this year, but certainly one that has given teams trouble over the past few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, Thorson has 11 of the team's 14 offensive touchdowns, 6 he's thrown, 5 he's run for. He isn't a particularly prolific passer, but he's good enough on his feet that when pressure comes, which Penn State certainly will bring as one of the better pass rushing teams in the country, when pressure comes, he's capable of getting outside of the pocket and doing some damage on the ground. So the issue this week is going to be whether or not Penn State can contain Clayton Thorson.
Yeah, and if they're able to do that, then you have to feel pretty good about Penn State chances. But at the same time, Northwestern's defense, which has really been a strong suit of that program under Pat Fitzgerald, it's been difficult to score on Northwestern in bunches in most cases. Obviously, people have found a way to do that this year on occasion, but still, Northwestern's defense is ranked 18th in the nation for points against per game.
Number 7 pass defense in the country in terms of passing yards allowed per game. Their run defense isn't nearly as strong as that, and they're sort of middle of the pack when it comes to stopping guys on the ground. So I would certainly expect it to be a Saquon Barkley and Penn State rushing game heavy when it comes to Saturday. I would expect them to be the features, Barkley and Lynch, as opposed to the Hackenberg air attack.
Yeah, but then again, on the flip side of that, Illinois went into last Saturday's game with as many interceptions as Ohio State had. And now certainly Ohio State's secondary is better overall than the Illini. Certainly just that statistic doesn't say everything about how good that secondary is, but Hackenberg looked good against a secondary that's found a way to find the ball in passing lanes. But certainly Northwestern is a much better team in that regard. But on the same side, on the flip side of that, offensively, ranked 104th in the nation in points for per game. So if you can find ways to score against Northwestern, you have to think that Penn State's defense is good enough to slow Northwestern down. It's really, you have to score more points than the other team, and that's really what it comes down to. So it should be interesting. It's a really big game, I think, because Penn State wins this. They end up 8-2. They come back to State College on a bye week, getting ready to prepare for Michigan in a game that, for my money, is one of the bigger ones of the past 5 years for Penn State. If they can win this weekend, it's an opportunity.
If they win this weekend, they probably see their first ranking under James Franklin.
Yeah,
too.
they're certainly they've been in that area, and the others receiving votes to beat a ranked team is obviously always going to help your cause. I'm going to be 8-2 in the Big Ten. Well, not in simply just in conference play, but just overall playing in the Big Ten conference going into November is the sort of thing that most voters recognize at this point in the season. So it should be interesting, big game. I think Penn State finds a way to win. I think they have more answers to the questions that Northwestern is going to pose. I think Penn State's defense is good enough and has played enough mobile quarterbacks to figure out what it needs to do to slow them down. But certainly Northwestern has been a thorn in Penn State's side at times. Has given Penn State difficult games, even ones that Penn State's won. They've never come easy, or they very rarely come easy, even if Penn State has the majority of the wins in this series. So it should be another good one. I always like games in Northwestern because I love looking at their field. It's super, the grass is super long, and I don't know why, but it just appeals to my eye. Nevertheless, should be a good game. And we'll see how it goes because I can't see into the future, so we just have to wait and see.
Yeah, as for the Vegas experts, they have it at a 2.5-point spread with Northwestern being the favorite, so they're essentially saying on a neutral field the game's a toss-up. They're two very even teams. I, too, think that Penn State will win by a small margin.
Small margin, much like the spread. Vegas knows what it's talking about. So we're back, and before we go, we got to answer some questions because the people have questions, and we've got all the answers. 2 questions this day. The first one is essentially, why don't they schedule bye-week teams? Like, if you're coming off a bye week and I'm coming off a bye week, we should play each other instead of if you're coming off a bye week and I've played 8 games, 9 games in a row, and now I get to play you. Is that fair? And yeah, I think it certainly seems like one of those things, especially for Penn State this year. They've played a lot of teams that are coming off of bye weeks. It's easy to get caught up in the fact that they have an extra week, but I think when you break down at least how Penn State approaches bye weeks, it's a lot of self-scouting. It's a lot of adjustments with what we're trying to do. A team goes, let's look at the film. Let's look at what we're trying to do. What can we improve on internally? What are the things that we can work on that we know that we can be better at, but we just haven't had the time to work on? I think people don't realize because they don't see it that practice is generally regimented into, they call them periods. So it's like 10 minutes of working on one thing or 4 minutes of working on one thing. And as the season goes along, especially for Penn State, they've cut a minute off of one period or a minute off another. So by the end of the day, they've cut off 5, 10, 15 minutes of practice to try and keep guys fresh. So that's a lot of time that you're working on a lot of different things. So for that whole first week of the bye week, when you don't have to game plan for a team, you're just working on what you're doing yourself. And is that an advantage? Maybe. But it's not like when Penn State goes into the bye week next week, they're going to spend 2 weeks preparing for Michigan.
Yeah, I think something else people tend to, when they make that argument that a team is given an advantage by coming off the bye week and playing a team that isn't coming off it, they think that the team might be fresher. Any college football program with a half-decent strength and conditioning program, which Penn State certainly has with Dwight Galt at the helm there, is going to be capable of staying fresh week to week at this point in the season. So I don't think there's any significant advantage that a team gets coming off a bye and playing a team that isn't.
Yeah, and on the flip side, Mike Poorman, our colleague slash columnist slash man who knows all the stats, was mentioning after practice yesterday that he looked up, I believe he told me that Pat Fitzgerald has only won once coming off a bye week at Northwestern. So certainly, while there are things to take advantage of with having that week off, there's no, it's not a guarantee that you're going to have an advantage going into that game. So certainly everyone likes a week off in the middle of the season to get fresh a little bit, but like you said, these guys are built for this sort of thing, and the programs are engineered to have them prepared. The other question, similarly, for preparing and game planning and what have you, is how do you prepare for a mobile quarterback in Thorson, a guy that can beat you with his legs and beat you with his arm, or both arms if he feels like throwing with the other one. There's no evidence to suggest that he's going to throw left and right-handed this weekend. But in the off chance that he starts to do that, how do you prepare for a mobile quarterback? And Penn State's actually used Trace McSorley this week on the scout team to sort of show what a mobile quarterback can do. Penn State didn't do that for Ohio State, and they didn't do it as much for Maryland. And you sort of saw it bite them in the butt a little bit. But like we had talked about with the periods when you practice, Penn State decided that it was more important to work on the offense for these games than it was to try and simulate what a mobile quarterback was going to do. So they used those 10-minute periods of the offense to work on offensive things instead of showing the defense some of those looks. But this week, they sort of flipped the script a little bit. The offense is looking good, and instead they're using some of this time to prepare the defense for what a mobile guy brings to the table.
So what you see a lot when a team is playing a solid quarterback is they'll try and, with the blitz, get pressure to him and get him off his game, sending 6-7 guys at a time. How can Penn State, because oftentimes when you play a mobile quarterback, that can sort of backfire on you and they get around the blitz and suddenly there's open field ahead of them. How does Penn State make sure that they contain him and balance that with their pass rush, which they like to send often?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the biggest thing that you can do is spy. I mean, you can have a linebacker, a Kabinda or Brandon Bell or someone like that. Keep an eye on him, just sort of shadow But I think the biggest thing is it comes down to probably just your fundamentals and staying disciplined in your lanes and what have you. Certainly, I mean, the very nature of having a mobile quarterback is that you're going to have a guy that you're just going to have one more offensive player than the defense is necessarily going to have to counter on any given side of the field. And I think you see that a little bit against Ohio State. You can prepare all week for Braxton Miller or JT Barrett or Cardinal Jones even. But at the end of the day, these guys are really good at what they do for a reason. And there's only so much you can do. I don't think Northwestern poses that same sort of threat to Penn State as Ohio State or Maryland did. But certainly, when you've got 11 of your team's 14 touchdowns, you must be doing something right. Speaking of sacks, though, before we go, Carl Nassib just needs one to break Penn State's single-season sack record, and he needs to average 2.3 over the next 4 games, if you count the bowl game, to break or to at least tie the NCAA single-season record. Certainly, telling someone to go out and just get a little more than 2 sacks a game is kind of a tough ask, but really Nassib averages 1.6 a game. He's certainly capable of one of these games of having a 3 or 4 sack outing, and it hasn't happened yet, but just the right circumstances, you could see that sort of happen. So it's something to look forward to down the road, and who knows, if he gets 3 this week, then certainly it's much more viable. But that's easier said than done. But anyone that can get sacks against Army, a team that doesn't throw, can probably find a way to get a sack or 2 against the quarterback that's going to hang on to the ball. But that is all for now. We will come back next week to talk about something. Penn State will definitely win the bye week. We can tell you that right now. It's been a long time since Penn State's lost a bye week.
Penn State will go 1-0 that week.
They will go 1-0 in the bye week. But for Zach, I'm Ben, and we'll see you guys next week.